That feels a little warmer. So let's get going. A busy afternoon, and we're going to start our afternoon with Nora Creech. And Nora, passionate about the shroud for sure. We'll be hearing about that and more about that. But she's really a lot of background, a lot of history, and a lot of knowledge from Nora. But she's really here to talk to you and all of us about what we can do to evangelize and what we can do in our own communities to help us even know more about the shroud. So please say hello to Nora Creech.
Hi, are you journey? Not yet. Sunless.
All right, thank you all so much for being here. I'm just delighted to be a part of this conference. It's kind of like a dream come true for somebody who grew up as a shroudie. I learned about the shroud in 1978 when a member of my church community in Boulder, Colorado returned from being a part of the CERT team. So Rudy Dickel was a member of the church Ideal Western. And so when he came back from Turin, he started giving a lot of talks about the shroud in our community. And my father was interested in it, and I was very close with my father, so I know about the shroud directly from Rudy Diptel. And Rudy is still active in teaching people about the shroud, and he still lives in Boulder. And so some of this is Rudy's legacy in terms of his reaching out to a high school kid and being encouraging and supportive and saying, you can share about this too in your community. So this is some of the fruit of growing up with Rudy and with my dad. So I'm a part of the organization Atonia. You've probably been hearing that a little bit throughout the day. So Atonia is the word that was used in the Gospel of John, and it was to describe the grave clothes that were found in the burial tomb. And so that's the name of our organization, and we are a part of a pontifical university, so the Regina Apostolorum, Queen of the Angels, Pontifical University based in Rome. So our apostolate is called Atonia. And we try to use the shroud to educate people in a variety of ways. We do conferences, we do lectures. Some of you may have heard Father Andrew Dalton. He's been very famous for his 3-hour interview on that shroud. So he's our spokesperson around the world. He's a wonderful, wonderful speaker. He does a great job of tying the shroud to the scriptures. So the gospel message he shares through the shroud. And then we also have a postgraduate certificate, and we've already been encouraging some people in here to sign up to that. It's available online. It is available in English, and I'd be happy to give you more information about that. But the thing that has really been my joy and passion over the past few years is working on our exhibit. And the title of our exhibit is Who is the Man of a Shroud? And so you'll see this intentional emphasis on the question. So the idea is that we're inviting people in. We are inviting them to come in and learn for themselves as they go through this journey of exploration. And then at the end, they can answer the question, who did you say that I am? So this exhibit that we created is really an exploration for individuals to go through and to learn about the shroud, but more importantly, to learn about the passion, death, burial, and ultimately the resurrection of Jesus through this journey, through the exhibit. So we have our exhibit here. I hope you will all will get the chance to see it. And I just have to say the owner of the exhibit just walked in. So Pam is here. People were asking me who owns the exhibit. Well, Pam owns it. She lives in Alabama, and she does all of it. But really, well, we really appreciate everything Pam does. I call her the Lucan lady. If any of you are familiar with that book about the Lucan lady who went around scattering seeds, and some of them blossomed into beautiful flowers, that's what Pam is doing with our exhibit. She's taking it around where she's invited and just spreading the seeds, and we've seen a lot of flowers already popping up from that. Another question I had was about the background of this exhibit. So it actually started 20 years ago. There was a Legionary of Christ priest by the name of Hector Guerra, and Father Guerra has a vision that we would have 100 exhibits in 100 locations around the world. And the very first exhibit that he created was in Jerusalem in the Notre Dame Center. That's right outside the walls of Jerusalem. And he partnered with an Italian sculptor by the name of Luigi Enzo Mattei. And Professor Mattei is a wonderful sculptor. In fact, he did the doors that are on St. Mary Major. And so they're the holy doors. So when you walk in to St. Mary Major, you pass through these doors created by Professor Mattei that are taken from the image on the shroud. And then as the doors are open, directly opposite from that is where Pope Francis is buried. And so if you do make that pilgrimage, it's noticed that those holy doors are from the shroud image. So Professor Mattei created this beautiful bronze sculpture of the man of the shroud. And then around that was developed an exhibit. So over time, we decided that the exhibit needed to be updated. And there were some things that new science that needed to be incorporated into it. But we also felt like there needed to be an emphasis on relating the shroud to the gospel message. And so that really became the focus of the revision to the exhibit. So you'll see when you go in and go through it that there's history, there's science, but then it transitions and it talks about how the shroud relates to the person of Jesus and the suffering that he endured through his crucifixion, but then also how he was buried, how the shroud can reveal to us more information about how Jesus was buried. And then there's that question about image formation that leads the viewer to think about the promise of the resurrection. So I want to just share with you that we have this idea to refresh the exhibit, and we wanted to debut it at the National Eucharistic Congress. So last July was the debut of the new refreshed exhibit. Some of you, I see some people who were there, but a lot of people tell me all the time, I was there, but I couldn't get in because the lines were so long. So if that was the case for you, that same exact exhibit is right here today. And that's the exhibit that Pam's been taking all around the country and sharing with people. So some of the things that we had in mind when we made this exhibit, I want you to know as you go through it, just to be thinking about it as you take your journey through the exhibit. When we were planning for the renewal of the exhibit, we were very conscious that we often talk about the shroud as a death cloth. And we really wanted to change that conversation to talk about it being the cloth of the resurrection. And that we wanted to show the joy of the cloth and not only focus on the suffering that it shows, which of course we do focus on that, but we also wanted to lead people to this image of resurrection with the promise that Jesus is the first fruits and we will be the full harvest. So just in the color schemes that we employed, these were very intentional. So we started out with a dark color in the bottom side. And then as you move across and you go up to the other side, you see we get to a gold color. And so this is the light and joy of the resurrection. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that we have color-coded each of the panels. So if a panel is for history, it has one color. If it's for science, it has another color. If it's scripture, it has what we call Atonia red. And then finally, the last panel is the gold panel, the panel of hope for the resurrection. Some of the things that were important to us as we were developing this exhibit was that we wanted to make sure that it was authoritative. So there are a lot of things about the shroud that are controversial. In fact, people often say, a Shroud of Turin, it's so controversial. But the truth is that there is so much information that is not controversial. There are so many facts that are widely agreed upon by most scientists who have studied the shroud and most historians who have studied the shroud. So we really wanted to focus on our exhibit has authoritative information that is widely agreed upon by a great group of experts. We do have a book that reflects our exhibit, so this is all the panels of the exhibit, and we have a panel that shows it has the acknowledgments, and so it shows all of the people that we consulted for review of the information that we presented, because we wanted to make sure that it was authoritative and agreed upon. Another conscious decision that we made was to try, and I will emphasize, try to write this at a 6th grade level. I don't think we were successful. I think that it's at least a 8th grade level, but our idea was that we wanted this to be very digestible information. If you go out and do a search on the internet or look at all of the books that are available on the Shroud, there's so much information, it's hard to sort through it all. So we tried to take the information and make it more compact and more easily digestible. So that was a very long introduction, even though this slide says introduction. But the reality is that the Shroud provides a really unique opportunity for evangelization because it allows you to visually share with people your faith. The Shroud is an absolutely perfect image that invites people in. I've heard it described as the sharp edge, so that it's the sharp edge of the wedge that opens up people's minds and hearts to learning more about Jesus and exploring how he can be important in their lives. So we tried to create this exhibit that would be a place where communities could offer an exhibit in their parish hall, in their schools, in their libraries, in community centers, and people could be invited in and learn about the Shroud, and then it would provide a foreigner an opportunity to share about her faith. And so that was the goal, and I think we are being successful with that. So some of the elements of a successful exhibit, I'd say the most important thing we have right over here is a beautiful replica. So this is a full-size replica, and it allows people to get right up close and they can look at it, they can study it, and in fact you can actually see the Shroud better on this replica than if you were to go to Turin during a time when it was on display, which hasn't happened, by the way, for 10 years. But this replica, you can get right up close to it and you can examine it for yourself. Now, one of the things we've done that's very, very engaging for young people is if you say, pull out your phone and just have a look at the Shroud, and you can guide them through going through the classic invert feature on there with their phones, and you should all try it out. And they can see for themselves that the Shroud is a photo negative, and it just blows people's mind. So we often put the instructions for doing the transition to the photo negative next to the Shroud so that people can experience that for themselves. Let's see. Some of the other things that are important for an impactful exhibit, we do have some of the weapons of the crucifixion. So this is obviously a crown of thorns. We find this is one of the most impactful things that people see. First of all, because they're always so surprised. Oh, it's not just a laurel leaf around the ears. No, this is a crown with very sharp and impressive thorns. And to think that it covered Jesus' entire head. This always has a strong impact on people. So this is an important part of the exhibit. We also like to include, we have our mini figures. So this is a 3D printed model of the man of the Shroud. And the thing that is so helpful about this is it's sometimes very hard for people to visualize how the Shroud wrapped the body of the man. And so this, we can invite the kids to come up. We put it out on the table and say, come on up, and you can try it for yourself. And then you can understand why there is a head-to-head image on the inside of the cloth. So we have found this to be very impactful with hands-on, with not just kids, but with adults too. So let's see and then in addition to the weapons of the crucifixion and the model, we also have the replicas of the playground, and we have the spear and we have the nails so that people can see them. They're allowed to touch them with supervision. And so it's a very experiential opportunity for people, not just to hear about something, but to touch it and see it and visualize it for themselves. So some of the impact of this is that we want to address different learning styles. So some people are auditory learners and can come and absorb everything from a lecture. Other people need to have that tactile experience and also just to move through an experience. So it's kind of like the journey that people go on as they walk through the experience. We are working on some interactive displays so that we could have some touch screens. So some of the things that we have envisioned for the interactive displays are, we just had a great presentation on the Sudarium. So how the Sudarium overlaid the face of the man of the shroud, and then how it corresponds with the blood stains that are on the shroud, like a visual representation of that. We're also looking at some things to show how the shroud looked on Easter morning. So it was covered with blood stains, and then it had an image on it. And so to look at what the shroud would have looked like before it had the water and the fire damage. So some different kinds of illustrations like that. Another one is how the shroud wrapped the body, perhaps with a binding strip to hold the cloth to the body. So we're working on some of these interactive displays for our future exhibits. So we want to make sure that when people come, that we are engaging them. So we want the visitors to feel very welcome, and that it's okay if they don't know all of this information. It's a lot to know. It's overwhelming how much there is to know about the shroud. We like to be able to provide ambassadors to guide people through the exhibit. And that is part of the reason why we offer the postgraduate certificate in shroud studies, so that people can learn, so that they're confident to accompany people through the exhibit, although certainly that's not required. But the idea of an ambassador is somebody to come and be there to welcome people into the exhibit, but not necessarily to be an expert, but to be standing by and maybe to offer to pray with people. We find that people are very emotional when the reality of the suffering that Jesus experienced starts to sink in. And we find that people are very open and willing to express their faith in a much more profound way. One story I want to share with you from when we were at the Eucharistic Congress. We had these long lines, as I mentioned, and we had a group of volunteers, and they were young people, probably college-age students, and they were managing the line for us the whole time. And every day I would go out and say, come on, you guys, I want you to come in and see the exhibit. I want to take you through the exhibit myself. And these college kids, they went, no, I'm good. I know what shroud is. I'm good. So day after day, I went out. Come on, you guys, come on in. And finally, the last day, they kept saying no. And I said, I'm insisting. You must come in here with me, and I'm going to take you through this exhibit. And it was a group of 4 young people, I'd say 18 to 20. And I took them in. I started leading them through the exhibit. We got to the life-size replica of the man in the shroud. And one of the young men, he put his hands on his head, and he said, you're blowing my mind right now. And then he turned and looked at me, and he said, why has no one ever told you this before? And I feel like that is what is motivating me. We have a responsibility to take all of this knowledge that we're absorbing, and we need to be able to translate it, and we need to give it to the next generation. And so that's really our mission. Our mission is to make Jesus known through his shroud. And so the shroud is the tool for evangelization. It gives us so many opportunities to show that our faith is true. Science supports all of the information that we're reporting in our exhibit and in our presentations, but the science doesn't explain how that image was made. There is still that question of how did that image get there? We have this natural image that's the result of a supernatural event. And that leads everybody to have to answer the question, who do you say that I am? And so that's where we leave our visitors at the end of the exhibit. Some of the things that we're working on that we haven't finished yet, I think we're at the very beginning of this, that we need to start having more conversations. We need to start reaching out to younger people, and we need to find ways to reach people that keeps them coming back, because that experience with that young man where he kept saying, no, I'm good, I know about the shroud, I know everything I need to know. That's what a lot of people think. a lot of people think, oh, that fake, that was disproved in 1988 with the radiocarbon dating. So we need to be thinking of ways to have the shroud be incorporated into our life as a faithful people. How can we make the shroud be relevant in every part of the year, not just during Lent? And so these are some of the things that we really want to start working on and then to share with people as we roll our exhibit out. We've done a few things. We had a really great event with Adriana Acutis. She came from Italy and she spoke with Father Spitzer. And she talked about the relationship of the Divine Mercy image with the shroud image. And it was a topic that no one had ever talked about before, but it was absolutely beautiful. And so that was an example of let's bring the shrouds into the life of the church. How can we incorporate it throughout the year in a more significant way? Another thing that we're working on is gathering testimonies, because we realize there's a lot of science and history that's out there about the shroud, and we're starting to really connect with the gospel. But what we really want to show is how the shroud makes a difference in people's lives, because people really are touched by it. It really can make a conversion of mind and heart when people really absorb the reality of Jesus' suffering and death and resurrection. So we have a young woman here. She's gathering stories called Shrouded Stories, and talking about how the shroud has impacted people's faith. So I feel like there are a lot of things that we can do better to start following up with people. Earlier, I see you guys from Dr. Johnston's church here, and he gave a presentation because he's been traveling with our Atonia exhibit from coast to coast. And he said, what can we do to follow up on the shroud? And one thing he has done is he's created a tract. And so when people leave the exhibit, they can take away a tract with them that explores how the shroud is related to the scriptures. And it really is an indication that points to the reality that our faith is true. Our faith is not based on just stories and legends, but it's based on a monument, an archaeological item that people can actually research and study and share within their communities. So some of the other things are looking for the spiritual message that we want to not just focus on science and history, but on the person of Jesus. And we can direct people's attention to the suffering servant, how Jesus is the fulfillment of so many things in prophecy, and how the Old Testament all points to Jesus. You can use the shroud to do a wonderful talk about that. I talked about the testimonies and then prayer opportunities. So we want to make sure that we're not just sharing information. We want to share so that people are touched by it, and so that they leave and they have that feeling that the apostles had on the road to Emmaus. Wasn't my heart burning within me? When I learned about the shroud, didn't I feel that fire in me that I just had to share it with somebody else? So that's really the goal of our exhibit and what we're trying to do. There are a lot of opportunities where you can share about the shroud in your community, obviously in a church setting, in Sunday school and Bible studies, catechal sessions, but we're also looking for opportunities to put this in community spaces where people who aren't necessarily seeking a spiritual connection can come and learn about the shroud through the exhibit. So that's a quick journey through our exhibit. And then I've got Jason Pearson is here, and he's the next speaker. Jason and I have been working together for, I think, 6 years. Yeah, quite a while. So Jason is the creative genius behind the project that we're working on in Orange County at the Christ Cathedral. So he's going to be telling you more about that. So we've taken our kind of humble exhibit that we have here, and he's, with his creative talents, is making it really, really extraordinary. And it'll be a great opportunity to invite people to come to an extraordinary experience. But we also can still have our analog experience that will also be impactful and invite people in. So I love it if you have some questions for me. I invite you to please go in and visit the exhibit. Quite a few of our our people who are graduates of the certificate program are here. So if people say they're a part of Atonia, they're a part of our group, and they love to share about Shrouds. And so anybody would be happy to answer your questions. So, do you have any questions for me at this point?
Who do you get hold of do the exhibition?
Pam is right back there.
I'll give you a flyer. Okay.
Yeah, she's been put a lot of miles on her vehicle. So yes,
We post
that's maybe. So if you would like to take the postgraduate certificate course, it does come with a certification that you completed the studies. We're also working on other kinds of educational materials because there really isn't anything right now for like catechists. If people want to be a teacher in your church or in their religious ed program. So really working toward developing some of those things. They don't exist yet. So please pray for that because that is something we really want to achieve. But I think we will in the coming months. That's a goal. I've also been, there's the group here from Jefferson City, Missouri, and they have been great supporters of our apostolate, and with their gentle nudges, I'll say, they've really been helping us toward developing some educational materials for 7th and 8th graders, middle school students. So we know we have a gap. We've got the postgraduate certificate. We're working on the middle school curriculum, and in between, there isn't a lot to build that boy right now. That I do think there will be, and maybe the seeds of it are laid here in this room.
All right.
Great, thank you so much.
Nora, thank you.